Why is social media so special to us? For those of you who are normally here, you probably expect the normal intro, but that's not what we're going for. This is the 400th episode of the DailyFlip podcast, so we're doing something a little special. What is it about social media that provides us so much joy, so much sadness, so much fulfillment, yet misery, emptiness? What is it about the platforms that highlight or possibly bring to the forefront some of our most terrible habits, practices, pitfalls as humanity? You could say that's our daily debate, but that's not really the case because it's a serious question. It's not just one where I want you to comment about it. I want you to actually think about it. And I know the answer has been out there for a while. People have been speculating for a long time. I'm not treading any new ground here, but I do have an article today that elucidates some of the benefits that being on social media, being active on social media can bring you, but also highlights issues that come along with it and also provides an example as to why it is aspirational in some degree. So I'm going to go to the third paragraph here because I think it is an interesting article from National Review. And to pretend as though I could say, oh, well, I know National Review is 100% accredited on this. The author is a social scientist. No. I'm not trying to pretend that that is the case. I'm saying that you can have social commentary, such as this author, that brings forward a very good point. So the third paragraph reads as such, quote, "Start with Vance. He has a quote-unquote X habit," as Real Clear Politics reporter Phil Wegman put it. In part because Vance, our first millennial vice president, grew up accustomed to social media, he has had little compunction about using it as vice president. He has issued article-length statements on Ukraine, immigration, and more. He often rebuts critics. In Trump's absence from the platform, he has become the administration's X-enforcer, end quote. There are people in power, whether it be the president, whether it be the vice president, whether it be media, that use their platforms to their own benefit, to talk about their policy, to broaden the narrative around them and build up a caricature of what they want the public to see in them. And therefore, they are able to use this to great effect in order to reach their own ends, whether it be running for vice president, whether it be becoming the next editor-in-chief at the Washington Post. And there are plenty more examples, like Mr. Elon who memed his way into popularity after going through the site, posting crazy things, and then eventually buying the site. And it's a little bit different in his case. He's not just memeing his way to popularity when he owns the platform because he can make his posts more viral, so to speak. But I think Vance is a great example. Vance was a person that was always regarded as semi-intelligent, someone who was calling out in his early days the Trump regime and was highlighting the possible ills and failures of our society to deal with segments of the population that are underserved, whether they be, some Democrats would analogize some of his writings to cities, and some people took it literally and talked about how the poorest communities, the old industrial towns in rural America, were underserved. And he used his time in the spotlight as an author that was highlighted to become a more voracious political pundit, and then after that used X to great effect in order to battle and grow his brand online. There are plenty of other people who do the exact same thing on Instagram, Snapchat. David Dobrik back in the day was a great example of someone who used YouTube as a platform to do things that were sometimes unsavory, to be unnecessarily I don't want to say amoral, but to be unnecessarily against the social fabric that we had created. David Dobrik did things that was obviously meant to break a certain norm and to put it on the internet in order to make money. J.D. Vance and his overly aggressive politics, his pit bullish style, is something that went over well for him, and it is also something that is against the orthodox of a civil nation. That's not to pretend as though you have to be the most kind person ever, but he was ruthless and relentless in most of his criticisms and going after people who disagreed with him, and this made him seem as though he was a strong character and allowed him to gain lots of notoriety on these different social media platforms. The problem that all of these platforms has is they boost to the top things that are atypical, things that are not necessarily the most normal, and therefore they actually replicate because people want to copy this material. They want to try to copy this success, and they start to breed habits that are asocial into social norms on these platforms, and therefore they pervade throughout society. What was the absolute winner of content in 2016, 2017, 2018? These outrageous prank videos that were possibly fake sometimes, things that go against what we would normally do or how we would operate within societies. You have Vines, which gained popularity simply because they were so weird and they were funny because of it. But you have an entire generation that came out of it that thinking that subversive humor in and of itself is the funniest thing, and not just subversive humor in the way that a true comedian points out the way that our society is failing or how certain things are not okay and tries to criticize them, but rather subversive actions that end up possibly rippling through society and causing negative effects. And what do I mean by that? You could say that the divisiveness within our culture and people's willingness to be louder, prouder, angrier is, and let's be clear, the numbers of people actually doing this is much lower than social media would make us believe. The actual number of incidences where people yell at other individuals across the United States are probably 1, 2 every single day on politics. And what I mean by that is the ones that we actually get records of, recordings of. Of course, there are more than that. But the amount that they're circulated, the amount that they are criticized, the amount that they are thrust to the center of the narrative, it would seem as though our divisiveness, our division within the country is so much worse than it actually is, or subversive habits of being that person that's willing to record somebody else in order to get viral content. You normally, within certain interactions, there is a presumption to privacy, or at least a presumption to the conversation staying between two people. But nowadays it is a completely normal habit in order to record things, in order to try to call people out and get social media acclaim for it. Now, that's not to say that it is simply the fault of the social media platforms. Our culture is one that is starved for attention in general, but it most definitely creates a structure, a perverse incentive system that these transgressive behaviors are plotted, are given love and support and likes, and then these people get validation for doing things that are naturally subversive on the internet, mainly because we are devoid of consequences on the internet. And that's not to say it's 100% true, because even in England, actually in England, they take it too far. You can actually be arrested for things you say online, some things that might be subversive, or even things that might be within the normal purview of speech, but because they're posted online and they gained lots of attention, people can be arrested because of it. We saw 2 cases within the last year that were made very, very public. I'm sure there are more than that. So that's not to say that there's a easy solution of just cracking down on what's done that on these platforms, that it would be considered subversive, because where would you draw the line? But you have to ask yourself, if you're actively engaging in these different social media websites, are you possibly feeding into some of the worst of these habits? Now, of course, on social media, there is plenty of content that is absolutely adorable and family related. I mean, my Instagram feed, I have Instagram for work. I don't use Instagram personally, but of course, people would send me things because I would be on there on a normal basis, and my feed had become something that was relatively genuine, cute animals that I would send to people I know, two of them in specific, and family sort of content about raising kids, how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife, how to be a better person. All these things are possible. I'm not trying to say that any one place is simply a cesspool, but I'm trying to identify that these places do allow for our worst habits to take over. If I was to go onto Instagram and click and like and send some of these different videos of women doing thirst traps, if I was to send them to my friends and like them, my feed would change very, very quickly. And that's not to say I'm above it. I'm sure I could fall very easily victim to it, because I am a person who is not the most evolved in the world. I'm not above my base instincts at some points. And I'm sure that I could fall down those rabbit holes just as anybody else could, especially people who are not my age, who have at least learned to some degree how to regulate that behavior. And I say just some degree, because if you would look at my YouTube watch hours, you would probably say this is obscene. But the youngest among us cannot. And when they grow up in a system where they're actively engaging in subversive content, and it is what allows these different creators to gain notoriety, then they are going to want to copy, follow in their footsteps, and therefore will end up perpetuating, at least on parts of the internet, the worst habits. So that is not to criticize everybody who is watching this on YouTube. That is not to say that you are immoral for doing it. It is to point out a valid criticism of the process, a valid criticism of these platforms, to ask you to sit down and really engage with your social media usage. Do you feel like you gain something from it besides a few hours of sitting there and doing nothing? Are you actively, and even if you do sit there and do nothing and you feel like you gain something from it, or you feel like you don't gain something from it, even ask the question, could you make your content more wholesome, things that actually enable you to be better, to actually bring knowledge into your life, that teach you skills? Everything is a tool, and to pretend as though Instagram is, or any of these other social media platforms, are inherently bad is a lie. To look at these different things, we have to understand that they are tools, and we have to understand that when they feed into our worst habits, our worst predilections, when they feed into our weaknesses, it is simply them shining a mirror upon ourselves, and we have to ask whether or not we like the reflection. And moving forward as a society, we're not going to be able to get rid of them. We have to be able to deal with them. So seriously, sit down with this idea. On this thread, I want to start posting shorts. This is something that I wanted to have ready by the 400th episode. I don't think that it will be, based on where I am on it right now. But I want to find a way to make 60-second clips of informational content that bring forward key parts of different key issues of the day. I don't know whether I post one a day, two a day. I'm honestly still structuring it out. It may be longer than at this 400th video. For all I know, it could be at the 450th video. But in this vein, it would be informational content that is meant to aid anybody who comes and watches it, and it would be under 60 seconds. Now, as my mission has been to inform on this channel and with the 6 and 6 episode, and they have not garnered thousands upon thousands of viewers, I doubt that this will catch in the algorithm, and that it will reach a point where I can say that it is doing exactly what it's meant to do for every single person. But if we can just help one or two people, if I can just help one person out there who's young and needs a little bit of extra education on these sort of things, if I can get one person to sit down for 60 seconds each day and learn something new about our political system, about technology, whatever it may be, that is worth it. And I encourage you to find people around you who are maybe in those social media holes and try to help them get out of it, and really start. And I'm not saying you actively engage and try to socially engineer them, but you make them ask the exact same questions. Do they feel as though what they are using and doing on social media serves them? So, with all that said, normally we would end with a Q thing, but no, I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you for 400 episodes. Thank you for enough people listening that I feel as though it is worth making this content. And I do enjoy just making this content and being able to work on my articulation. So I am a little bit, how should I say? It's a little bit selfish by design in order to put these sort of things out. But anybody that has stuck around this long and has made it this far into the episode, you are a true viewer. I really appreciate you. And I hope that you'll stick around for hopefully another 400. We'll always see how this plays out. And when the shorts are made, hopefully you enjoy those as well. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.